Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining us. This weekend, I was playing a tabletop exercise in cybersecurity. Some of you may know of that game called Breach the Keep. It has or had a physical version pre COVID, and as a result of the pandemic, a digital version has been developed. And my students at Durham College had the great fortune of being a part of it. And during that training session, one of my colleagues made a statement which I think serves as the perfect red carpet for today's Power Hour. He said, perfect is the opposite of done. I'll repeat that again. Perfect is the opposite of done. And my guest today is someone who has not only been a close friend to me, a fellow faculty member, but also a mentor, and someone who has never in his vocabulary mentioned to me that a project is done or a thought process is done. It's always about what is next. I often talk about success being a journey. Today is one journey that I want to take you on, but specifically narrow in on some of the challenges that have arisen in that journey and look at how this individual has been given back. Often we don't quite realize that cybersecurity can have a very huge impact, not just on the safety of our digital lives, but also on the prosperity of our communities. And today's discussion is going to join into right just that. I always mention this when I speak to my students or when I speak to my colleagues or when I keynote everywhere in the world. I mention that time that is invested in thought is the best time saver ever. This is an individual who thinks through everything very well and is never done, always thinking about how can we make things just that much more perfect. Please join me today in welcoming an individual who is in need of very little introduction. You've seen him in other cyber exchange events, you've seen him on other sessions as well. He's the CIO of the region of Durham, Kalyan Chakravarthy. My name is Ali Hirji. You all know me as the host of the Power Hour, full-time at Durham College, both in AI and cybersecurity. And it's my pleasure to welcome my mentor, Kalyan Chakravarthy, or in short, Casey, to the Power Hour. Casey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. All the while you're doing the introduction, I was thinking, is there anybody else who is doing along with me? And then I realized you're talking about me, so it was a surprise. So thank you for those kind words. And it's been an honor to have met you and to be with you in the journey that we started with the collaboration between Region of Durham and the Durham College, and even on the CyberX platform as well. So it's been great to know you.
Absolutely. And Casey, I can never forget that our journey began in 2018, September, when I walked in, as always, late to a conference engagement. And just in time, though, for you to say, "Where's Ali?" And I was just walking in through the door. And that was one hell of an entry for me into my first ever conference with the region of Durham. So you've definitely had some memories. And I want to build on some of that by taking you back a little bit to that journey to Canada. Now, Casey, you studied in India. We have a huge immigrant population, let alone in Canada, but in Durham region alone. You studied technology in India, computer science specifically in Mumbai, if I'm not mistaken, and you made that journey to Canada where you not only sat in sales roles and operational roles, you slowly graduated into senior executive roles as well. Tell us a little bit about the journey that brought Casey to the region of Durham.
Oh, that's that's a trip down the memory lane. So I'll start with I was born in a remote village in India, and I think now it's no longer remote, but at that time it was definitely remote, where we didn't have a high school over there, so I had to travel for my high school. And let me also tell you one more thing: I have never learned English to speak in English, read, write anything until I was 18, and engineering was the first time that I ever dabbled into English. And I still say that like English is my fourth language. And sometimes when I speak, I still am converting whatever that is there from my mother tongue to do an interpretation and then speaking it. So for all the people who think that like language is a barrier, I think I am an example. I still struggle with it. There are some times where there are a lot of thoughts that come to me, but I'm not able to express it in the right way. But that shouldn't deter you from doing anything, because I think as we talk more, we would be able to get to it. I wanted to tell this because I see a lot of people in Durham College where I teach, where people are afraid of speaking. They have a lot of great ideas, but they just hold themselves because of the language barrier. And I tell to them saying, try to speak, try to get in, and you will get, and you would be able to speak it much more fluently. So that's the first thing. And going back to the story, then I moved to one part of the coast, the east coast to the west coast in Bombay or Mumbai, and I did my engineering from there. After that, I joined a consulting company where I was consulting with GE, General Electric. So I was there in Hungary, UK, US, Japan. So looked at various different cultures and worked in various different in various parts of GE. And when I was working at Cincinnati, that is where for GE aircraft engines, I decided saying that like, okay, technology is great, understanding technology is good, but you really want to understand the way the technology can change the business, really push in that. And that's where I quit my job and joined Queens for my MBA. So that is where Canada is because of Queens, and now Queens is because of Canada, so other way around. But it is that's where I came in, and I took the leap of faith going to an MBA. And after that, like I did something which I never thought I would do. I went into a technical sales job. I was in a business development exec for IBM. And from there, after that, like many of my friends, my MBA classmates, they were working for either the big banks or for the consulting companies. I quit IBM and I joined a not-for-profit organization, and which many of you might know, called as Toronto International Film Festival, TIFF. And that was the time where TIFF was at Young and Carlton in a small, dingy place, like it was like around 40 people, 40 to 50 people, and it's in a small place. And they were building this big, new, shiny building, TIFF Bell Light Box. If you ever come to Toronto, or if you're in Toronto, it's at King and John. I really love you guys if you can visit once everything is open. And I can still remember, like with the rugged jeans, like we have, like, me and a couple of my team members laid the network cables for it. So I still have fond memories. And after that, I came to after TIFF, I went to Alcohol and Gaming Commission. I led the IT team for Alcohol and Gaming Commission. And so a lot of people commented from a fun-loving place to a fun-stopping place. So that was a good journey.
Yeah.
And then from there, like I ended up in the region, which was I think 2 days back. I celebrated my third anniversary at the region. So it is a fun journey.
Absolutely. And Casey, in the first 10 minutes of the Power Hour, I really tend to focus on, my ethos and my mantra has always been people, process, technology. And I really want to unpack the people piece just a little bit more. Now, you and I have had many discussions, and I've turned to you for advice on so many things. And one of the things that you've always hinted at is, don't chase your pension, chase your passion, because everything else will follow from there. One other thing about your career is that though you had such and still have a very strong technical acumen, although I like to joke that you're still trying to sign into MSN Messenger, which is a separate subject altogether, along with your technical acumen, you made sure that you developed a good sense of business and the commercial aspect of IT. You focused on what Farouk Nair likes to call OT, operations technology. What drove you to get your MBA alongside your technical skills?
I think it is what was happening when I was working with GE. I have to give a lot to the mentors that I had in GE, because at that time, these were the times when Jack Welch was in the helm, and where there was a Six Sigma, there was all these kind of things that were coming in. And I could see that there is technology can change it, but like we are not able to explain what you're doing it, like you will not get the funding that you want. So that was the times where there were like 5 to 10 teams fighting for the same kind of funding. And the only way to get funding is not about how good your idea was, but like how well you have explained that idea. So
Absolutely.
that was a change that like I really looked at it and said like, okay, now I need to understand the business so that I can talk in their language rather than expecting people to understand my language. I should be able to talk in that language. And in the same way, like it almost is in the English as well, right? Like where I have a lot of ideas until and unless I put it in a language that is understood by a broader cross section of audience, that is all worthless. Like I can be like I can give you the best advice, but like if I'm saying it in a language that you don't understand, then like you are not getting any value out of it. So I think that was a key point that like that stuck to me when I was working at aircraft engines, and that's where when I went to MBA, and from there like I was making a conscious choice to say that it is not, I'm not a technical person who understands business, but like I'm a business person, business oriented person who understands technology very well.
Absolutely. And I think I cannot underestimate how important that philosophy has been in your teaching life as well. I think the students that you've taught at Durham College and the other teaching engagements you've had, the ability to apply theory, not just for profit, but for good, is something that we often see as overlook as a skills gap. And I think your contribution to that field will remain continuous and remain pretty momentous, especially with some of the other teaching courses that you're going down. Now, a question has come in, and I expected this, and as you know, typical to my style, I'll weave them into our discussions as we move along. And this is the moment when you realize that eureka moment, or probably that nightmare moment when you realize security is a thing and security is a reality. Often, when we go down this path of laying down cables, of connecting machines to one another, getting data moved from one side to the other, we tend to look at technology working, and it does what we expect it to do, but we don't necessarily think about the context. Technology doesn't operate in a vacuum. What was that moment in your information technology career that you thought and realized, hold on, security is something that I need to start thinking about and perhaps even practicing? Casey?
I think it is multiple places where, to be very honest, because the term security itself has broadened as things have progressed. As technology evolved, the security evolved. Like where for the biggest one like that hit me was during when we were laying out like from a TIFF, like where we were building a greenfield operations, because like any IT guy's dream is to build at least one greenfield operation, because like generally where you get into a place where like it's already set, like it is at 50%, 60%, and you are doing the improvements in that, and like you have a legacy technology to deal with. But I've got a chance to really set up a greenfield operations for a good medium organization. And when we are looking at it, when we are trying to do that, like there were a lot of questions that the team, that everybody, as people asking, what if this? What if somebody will try to? And the first question was, why would people do that?
Yeah.
And that is where then like you get that saying that like it is not about why people would do it, but you need to plan for the worst
Yeah.
and hope for the best for sure. So that is where security as a component came in. Then when I was doing the different roles, as the technology evolved, like cybersecurity as a question, it came up like a larger one as I progressed in my career.
Yeah, and I think, this point of, why would they do this? We need to reverse that to say to ourselves, well, why not?
Why not?
Simply because it is, for lack of a better word, by virtue of being so hyper connected, it is hunting season at all times. And I mean that quite literally. The word threat hunting also has another meaning to it, where hackers and bad actors are hunting for their next victims. And I think you've laid a very important aspect in this, which is the aspect of not only was it about you realizing that security is something we need to start talking about, it's realizing that those around you also started to develop their own understandings of security, so on and so forth. Which takes me into the next part of our discussion, which is really, and I've said this before, if you're not preparing, or if you're failing to prepare, then you're preparing to fail. And there must have been situations in your career where you had to deal with an urgent situation related to security. How have you led your teams, whether it's been at TIFF, whether at the Alcohol and Gaming Commission, or whether at the region of Durham? How have you led your teams in moments of crisis? What's your philosophy towards incident response?
I think three words that like I always believe on is like don't get into panics. Like that is a very important thing, because like where people, the moment you have is it's about keeping your communications clear. Once an incident happens, we've as technology, like whether it is I'm leading it or I'm a part of the team that is that is responsible for this, everybody wants to know what happened and what is happening.
Yeah,
And like that is the biggest thing, because like everybody has a job. Like even when you look at in any company, a communication team will be ready to ask those questions. Will
absolutely.
be the C-suite like who will be looking at it to say, hey, I am responsible for it, because they need to communicate with other people. And like there is your team, the rest part of the IT team, because a lot of things people think that like IT is one single team. yes, from an external, it is one single team. But like if you look into it, if there are larger teams, there are like 150, 200 people who are not even involved when a security thing comes up. So
Right.
how do you keep them appraised? Because those are the service desk people where the calls might come in for the same thing. So what is the communication plan? I think developing a good, solid, simple communication plan to say this is level 0, level 1, level 2, and if this happens, this is what I will do. And it doesn't have to be super detailed, but like at least having that plan helps. The other is like keep calm. Like it is, yes, it has already happened, and that is not the time to point your fingers or put in the blame of who, why. It's more about let's solve it, and then we can come back to the table and talk about what needs to be done and why it happened and how do we make sure that like it won't happen again. Because from a team's perspective, it's not their fault. Everybody has really put in their best of their efforts to really make it happen, but sometimes we do overlook things. So how can we make sure that like it cannot be repeated? And giving that comfort to the team is very important. Communication and comfort, those two things that like I sincerely believe during those panic situations will help.
The two C's of excellence, right? Communication and comfort, being there for your team, and that breeds collaboration, that breeds consistency, and more importantly, that breeds the competitive element that we all need in order to stay competitive as businesses, as communities, so on and so forth. Now, Casey, in this situation of incident response, and we've dived right into the deep end of how you got introduced to security, how it became a matter for you, and then we went into your role as a leader and how you've sort of dealt with these situations and your philosophy towards incident response. However, one may always turn around and say, and I'll give you a metaphor, which is what I'm probably only good for, and that is, we're not in. Often people say we're all in this boat together, and that's not true. Some of us we're in the same ocean, but some of us are in yachts, some of us are on life rafts. Case in point, we have different budgets to deal with security. We have different budgets to deal with situations that we may proactively plan for. In the different roles that you've been a part of, how influential, besides the obvious reasoning, how much of an influence has budget had on your ability to plan and prepare, as you called it, for the worst?
I think the answer is yes and no. It has a lot of influence because, like, to really none of the security thing, like, if you want to do something, there is a price and a cost associated with it.
For sure.
But coming back to this is where, like, it ties to having a business person who understands the technology is very important because you can look at it for a non-technical person. Cybersecurity is like a simple thing. Like, if you
Oh, yeah.
look at your in a typical organization, I'm talking in a corporate world, if a CEO is there, a CEO comes in and asks, are we protected against ransomware? Are we protected against, are we cyber, is your cyber security good? And
Yes.
it's like, and I asked that question, like, because this is what the questions that most of us get in, right? And I
Yeah.
would say a yes and no, because there are multiple aspects to it. One is like from an internal perspective, what you're doing. Second is from an external perspective, how well you are getting it. And third is from the people perspective. Like it is as much as it is you are securing. And I always take an analogy to say that like it is like securing your house. You can put in, once you put in a security system, is your house safe? Not generally, not like they can still break in, it will inform you what has happened, but like it is not stopping you. And if you lose your keys somewhere and somebody can make a copy of it, and if it is coming in, so that is from a people perspective. And like if you are not having the technology people and an external, so what extent are you protected? That needs to be given, because whether you have the budget or not, whether you get the money or not, it's very important that you keep the leadership at the same level so they understand what level are you in. So the risk is taken by you as a whole from an organization and not just by an IT. Because post facto, you can't go and say, I didn't do it because I didn't have money. Because then the answer would be, you should have asked me. I would have given it to you. So that's why making sure that like everybody gets understand that risk is very important. So that's why it becomes, as much as you plan about every year, you go and tell your leadership team to talk about the what projects that you would be doing, or what is your vision, what is your roadmap. The same way, you also need to get them on board on the risk management as well, because that is very important. that makes it understand, and like then people can look at the priority. Do I want to do something else, or do I want to invest in cybersecurity? So that's how like you manage it ultimately. For sure it will be the responsibility of whoever is leading the IT, but it's still really dividing the risk, explaining the risk is very important. As much as no budget is a good budget, every budget is too small.
Absolutely. And I think, Casey, that the other part that I've noticed in your practice is whether it's been with organizations that have partnered with Durham College, such as Zscaler is a good example, IBM, AWS, whatever else have you, CrowdStrike, Sentinel One, you name it, right? All of these, VMware, Carbon Black, all of these organizations, you've always had a philosophy very similar to another gentleman, Mark Dillon or John Pinard for that matter, which is you've never looked at the vendor community as vendors. We've also always looked at them as partners and always engaged them from a perspective of don't sell me for the purpose of selling me. Tell me the value that you bring to the table. And I think that makes such a big difference when C-suite executives in charge of IT, in charge of security, take an open door approach with the vendor community and lay their requirements up front. I think that the caustic relationship sometimes needs to be addressed. Our vendor community provides us the tools that we need. And we may not be using the tools today, but we might in the future. And having that open door really goes a long way, especially when budgets are too small. So your budget philosophy is also one that I'd like to delve into, but there are quite a few questions that have come in and a lot of questions that are coming in from the perspective of the region of Durham. So I'm gonna take a little bit of a detour and take you back now after looking at your journey, in Toronto and India, and come back to the region of Durham and really begin to tease out the idea of how you, as a business person who understands technology, as a business person who knows the return on investment in security, what have you been thinking about in terms of how to provide or how to at least get people thinking about security in the region of Durham? And one of these areas is in finance. We look at Paytm in India as a good example, and I think it's Vijay Shankar who says, what, don't build anything of which you're not a customer. Always be a customer of whatever it is that you want to build. And in your perspective, when you look at the region, when you look at the kind of initiatives we have from small to medium businesses, so on and so forth, what are you trying to do to ensure that these businesses are cyber ready? Are you trying to run some programs? Are you engaging with them differently? Some perspective on that, Casey.
I think I'll answer that question in two parts. One is like an internal focus from a region's perspective, and the other is from as a region helping the small medium businesses. That's another portion. So let me take the first part of the question to say from a regional perspective. Yes, like I think that is one thing we are looking at is like we are looking at the way to change the customer experience, because what COVID has done is like it fast tracked digital transformation and the digital literacy of the people. More than the digital transformation, it is the acceptance with which people can use the channel has been fast tracked. So that's why we are looking at like how can we change our customer experience. So to talk about to say from a digital payment to everything like where we are talking about a fully functional digital region, how would we go there? What are the things that like we need to look at? But while doing it, it is not about us, it's about having the customer first mindset and going through the customer journey, always looking at it from their perspective. It is not about how we'll do it. It is we want to remove the complexity from the customer, because like the simpler it is for the customer to do his or her or their job to really do it, that is where we want to go in. And that is how our next what we call it, the project is My Durham 311, and that is what as a customer experience one, as a part of a smart city we are doing it. So that is a 36 to 48 months roadmap that we have put in, that we'll be working on. The second part of it is about, like you talk about, how do we help the small medium businesses, that community that is there, that need the help right now from a region's perspective, like where there are multiple pieces onto it. Like one is to really give them that platform, and I think Shop in Durham is one of the platforms that we see, which is done by Whitby BIA and supported by the region, where it is consolidating and really putting the effort to bring in anybody who wants to do a digital kind of it's like a platform where people can put in their businesses online, and it has all the ingredients to make it happen. And it is that online marketplace that we are creating. so that like it will be helpful for all the small medium businesses. The second is like where we are looking at, like there will be an extensive digital literacy program that we want to start with, which we want to drink our own Kool-Aid first before we go on to others, to say, I want to really look at and say, how can I make sure that from a people perspective, they are aware of anything that is happening from the security perspective. And I will be empowering all the employees that are there with that knowledge. And then the next would be is like, how can we offer that to everybody or anybody who wants to come and take it? So this can be an online class. This can be where we'll by request, like you can appoint whatever we can go to. But the first is like we have to drink our Kool-Aid. That is where we are going through currently, to say what really sticks, because
Absolutely.
the challenge of this cybersecurity is it's a vast subject, and you can do it in 15 minutes and you can do it in 15 years.
Yeah.
So what is that real value? What is that exact amount is what we are trying to figure out right now.
How does population factor into this? And I ask this question when perhaps I've been watching or reading too much of different. For example, I watch a show on Netflix called Bad Boy Billionaires, where they look at, in India specifically, they look at the founder of Kingfisher Airlines as an example, Vijay Mallya. Or you look at some of the other stories, Sahara India, for example. One of the things that they've capitalized on, for good and for bad, is population and density. Do you think that population and density also has an impact on how we plan our cybersecurity services and how we plan our cybersecurity awareness programs?
Absolutely, it plays a large part. Like if you have a dense one, so if you want to look at like there is a density in the population, and like if you want to educate them, like it is that you can create that network effect in a small place, and like especially like a regional like Durham, which is very vastly spread. And the big thing that like we are really looking at is now a broadband, like where there are still in like people don't understand that, like even in the region as well as a lot of places in Canada, broadband is still a luxury.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we're talking about cyber security, but like we need to provide them to really access to anything cyber before we talk about the cyber security. So these all happen because of the lesser density that we have, and like you don't have a place where you can capture all the people. Whereas in markets like India, or like there are China or other places, I don't want to comment because I don't know. I have not been there, but I can definitely comment on the Indian market. It is very easy to capture because, like, if you have the density, the network effect is very easy to come in.
For sure.
And if you don't have the density, you're not interacting, then the network effect comes down dramatically.
Absolutely. And let's stay with that just a little bit more, because when you have density, and for those of you who are watching on cyberexchange.ca, we have about 60 to 70 viewers, and thank you all for your questions that keep coming in, starting to stitch them in as I always do. Right below on the ticker, you're seeing little notes about the number of municipalities within the region, the number of councillors within the region, etc. All of that bleeds into, or feeds into rather, the cybersecurity strategies that Casey has to think about. And I want to delve into population and density just a little bit more, because with population and density and with distributed forms of government, so on and so forth, comes the question also of governance. And Casey, it's not necessarily your portfolio to say this is going to be our cybersecurity strategy, but when you've got distributed governance, where you've got multiple councillors, different mayors, etc., different portfolios, how difficult has it been, or how easy has it been to get everybody at the table to discuss cybersecurity for the benefit of the community?
I think once again, like it is internal and external, right? Like there are two pieces of it. And the internal, I think we have got a good grasp on it. And for that, the key reason being collaboration. And what I mean by that is from a cybersecurity one, like if anything is happening, all of us, there are 8 local municipalities, like all of us, like whoever is leading the IT for that local municipality, we meet regularly. We meet every Friday for an hour and a half, and we talk about the initiatives that everybody is doing, so that like we can share it, so that like we are not in doing it right from the scratch, or like we are not trying to go against each other, or like we are doing something that like doesn't fit into it. So that collaboration is very important. So that is what like we are bringing it in. The second is from an external one. It is about, like, I think although you look at there are different levels of government, each level has its own mandate. So where, like if it is where like from a local municipality perspective, they have a different mandate than a region, and the province will have a different mandate. So we have our like, and the biggest thing that like we're doing is like Invest Durham, Sonia, Simon, like they are doing an amazing job to really reach out to the communities, because that is part and parcel of their roles. And like they are doing an exceptional job to reach out to these places and talk to them, get the feedback. And that is very important, right? Like where to do our job. I think the biggest thing I request all the people, whoever it is there, is provide us with feedback. Ask us. Maybe we are thinking about it, but like we want to see the real value. If you feel that there is a value, we are ready to roll out programs in that way.
Absolutely. And I think, you've raised another very important point when you draw the dichotomy between internal and external. My father always tells me is that, you shouldn't be helping somebody else walk when your own shoelaces are untied, simply because if you fall down, you take another person down with you. And with that perspective, I want to delve a little bit more into the economies of scale and understanding and a community within which you are, for lack of a better word, at least seen as some of the important figures when it comes to cybersecurity. Now, when a community is now engaging, let's take Paytm as a very good example in India, with demonetization, hyper virtualization, like you mentioned, very fast digital transformation, more and more people now trading through e-commerce means using digital currencies, so on and so forth. Has it ever got you wondering about, am I even studying the threat landscape facing my community? Have you thought going down the road of perhaps establishing a unique center where you can monitor what's happening within the ranges of our geography? Or are you basically relying on the kind of feeds and information that you may get from generic sources? Your thought on building a customized intelligence platform to secure the Durham region?
I think that's a great thought. To be very honest, like so, when you look at it, there are multiple priorities when you get in. Is about a keeping the lights on. That becomes a bigger part of the job. The second is like where you are reacting to the innovations or reacting to the demands of like, and I'm talking completely internally focused once again to start with. You are reacting to the demands of the business to say these are the solutions that need to be developed. And the third is from that, like where like are these solutions secure, and like from every perspective, not just cyber, but from a security perspective. And that questions are being asked, and like that is where we are learning. There is a standardization that like we are looking at from our ecosystem. And I would say from our ecosystem is like what we have, because that is where the knowledge goes in. Because like if you want to really get in, and we are looking at a lot of other areas, like a lot of other companies who are actually, they are driving this kind of a thing, and like we would love to piggyback on it rather than us doing the same thing. Like whether it is a CCTX, or like there are a lot of this where we send in, for example, our CISO Terry Madsen is the part of the whole Canadian security group, like where most of the public sector people, they discuss it, like they meet every quarterly, I think, where what is happening on the public sector one. So we are sending our representatives to really get that information, because I think as much as like region is a big thing, but like there are a bigger volume areas, like we need to look at it from a national perspective, from a federal perspective, which can bring it, and we can localize it in a much bigger way. So at present, we are in that mode to really consume the information, follow the things that I've been doing. Would we love to really lead something? Absolutely, yes. Why not?
Yeah.
And we need a perfect partner for that. Maybe we'll have Ali will come up with a wonderful idea, and with Durham College, we'll announce like in maybe in another two months, we'll announce something, and like that would be a great thing.
Whenever I want to convert my 2 rupees of thought into dollars and pounds and euros, I come to KC. So yes, absolutely, I will be coming to you. Casey, lots of questions pouring in, and I know we wanted to stay true to the financial side of security and how to empower businesses. So we'll continue on that journey for another 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll delve into some of the questions which are really interesting and questions that I didn't anticipate coming. So I think it'll open up quite a few new doors of discussion for us and new ideas of products and prototypes we may want to start developing. You made a really important point, which is, you referenced Sonia, you referenced Simon and the rest of the awesome team at Invest Durham. And I say this to a lot of people is that one of the beauties of how InvestDurham works is that they've removed barriers of entry with a standard of entry. It's not just about stopping people and saying, no, no, we can't do this. It's about creating a standard. And if you can meet these standards of excellence and you can deploy in the region of Durham. Forpay, for example, one of our partners at Durham College, doing some amazing work now with AI and parking solutions and securing payment methodologies in the trails, for example, in Uxbridge, working closely with Christy Honey. Good examples of innovations that are coming here. However, when it comes to the whole taking businesses online, securing businesses online, have you found that businesses are actually reaching out to you, saying that, hey, we've experienced some form of something that may leave us uneasy? Are you seeing more requests from the community and the business folks, the BIAs as an example, the Chambers of Commerce, for example, where they're looking for guidance? Or is it just everyone trying to figure out for themselves what they need to do?
I think this is, I would put a disclaimer against it to say this is completely my personal opinion and what I heard. I might be wrong in what I'm saying, but like most of the businesses are trying to figure themselves out.
That's
And
good.
like they look at from a public sector, the government in like starting up, like to say how much funding, what is the kind of funding that is available to really do this startup. Once they operationalize, they think that like it is for them to figure out what they need to do, but they don't know there is a lot of help that we can provide in terms of either from a local government or from a provincial in fact. So I sincerely would say that like you need to reach out like all this whichever the business they are trying to find out, somebody has done it. It is not that like you have to reinvent the wheel. So it's good to borrow and steal. Why not? Like if there is a technology that is there and if there are 10 people, you can create a marketplace. And I think Shop in Durham is one of the first
Very good
initiatives. I
example.
feel I feel that is we are going into that path. That is the start of it, where you can see the online platform, like where you can create an e-commerce platform. So you're bringing all those things together, like where it's a good equivalent of not so Amazon, not Amazon.com, like all these kind of things that are coming in. But I sincerely would rally behind Shop in Durham to really say that I think it is creating that ecosystem, it is creating that marketplace. Is it the end of it? No, I think that is the start of it. And like once we start like pulling in the request and as well as our knowledge, I think we can make that big.
Absolutely. And I do want to take the next 10 seconds just to remind our audience that look, the Power Hour is not intended to be a technical dive into one product or the other. It's to get you to understand that security doesn't operate in a vacuum. And what I mean by that is often we tend to value return on investment through payments. Payment isn't what drives business growth or community growth. It's content, it's communication, it's collaboration. And when you're able to present content in a certain way, opportunities in a certain way, it drives users, it drives behaviors, it leads behaviors down a certain path, and that's what drives growth. That's what drives businesses forward. And I think another shout out to InvestDurham. I know they're going to be a part of the Canadian Women in Cybersecurity Conference. Sometimes you might wonder what's the return on these things. The return is these discussions, these communications. The return is building these kind of partnerships and relationships. So shout out to Sonia and team for continuously supporting and making sure that they are a part of all these initiatives that are bringing new opportunities to the Durham region. Now, Casey, the next few questions that have come in, I will say this, that it makes me also pause and reflect quite a bit because I didn't see this coming, but it has. And it relates to social engineering. Thank you. I know Prasad is on as well, and he sent this question. It was him or someone else who sent a series of questions. And that is on social engineering and ensuring that our population is safe online, not just our businesses, but our users. I'm sure, Casey, you know about this. For example, Trace Labs done some work with CyberX as well. They do online initiatives where they run similar to hackathons, but they run it around finding missing persons, especially around Indigenous folks, so on and so forth. The online space, especially given that we have students in the Durham region, is a very, very sensitive space because students have costs, students have things that they need to get done. And the internet can be a very dangerous place from a transactional perspective. Besides drugs and trafficking, other things can happen online. A, is social engineering and studying what's happening online something that you're starting to pay attention to? And if so, are some of these sensitive discussions around drugs and trafficking starting to emerge as priorities for your cyber posture, Casey?
I I think social engineering is a big thing. And that is where, like I said, like I think we are still figuring it out from an internal perspective to really, because it's, yes, I understand the drugs, like I understand the other like dangerous things that are happening on it. But like first we need to have that basic understanding, and like where the literacy starts, like you can't graduate on day one. Like, so we need to start with the first grade, the second grade. So I feel that like that is where we are currently, and we will be going into that aspects as well. But at this point of time, have we considered it? Yes. Are people ready to consume it? I don't know, because like I think we still need to teach them the basics of it to really talk about whatever comes to your way is not, you are not the intended recipient. So how do you differentiate between the simple thing to say, when any communication comes to you, whether it can be a text message, it can be an email, it can be anything, there are different forms.
Yeah.
So how do you decide you are the intended recipient or not, and how do you engage with it? We are talking about a broad engagement. That engagement can be posting, that engagement can be replying, that engagement can be having a conversation, because like even people, there is like and I don't want to name names, but like where like in some of the places where like in one of our partners, where there is a happening, people were conversing with a person on the name of a fake name, like that had an employee of their own, and they didn't realize that. And it was like a work in progress for at least 3 months to get the credentials. So that is the kind of effort that they are putting in. So that's why rather than saying any topic, we term it broadly as engagement. Don't engage if you are not the intended recipient, and like any information that you want to give.
Absolutely. And Casey, there's more questions that have come along these lines, and I can see where it's coming from, especially with Women in Cyber as an event coming up. Last year, around about this time, also reports on human trafficking and situations in Eastern Ontario that need reflection on. I want to delve just into one more question related to this piece of online safety, especially for minors and children, especially in the region that are online transacting as well. What is your perspective? And again, slightly left field question, but it's nice to get your position on this, on vigilantes taking security into their own hands. For example, you may have heard of Predators Toronto, which is a group that basically sets themselves up online and looks for individuals who may be, as an example, trying to lure minors. There's a lot of risk. In fact, I wouldn't say there's a lot of risk. It's a very risky endeavor to go down these paths. What's your perspective on vigilantes who may be looking to do such stuff, and how do you approach that when it's happening in your community?
Yeah, I think first thing that I want to say is like we have a wonderful DRPS that can help us in doing anything that you find, like, and they do an amazing job in this. So that is where we should be helping them. And I personally, in my personal opinion, not as this as a regional employee, but a very personal opinion,
Absolutely.
I feel is that I trust in the government. Like I work in the public sector, I see the passion with which people really care about the people, because the only reason why people work in the public sector, the major reason, it's not about your salary, it is not about your pension, but like it takes a certain kind of personality to really feel for the people, to really feel passionate about serving the people. So with this kind of a people, I would say you should not be taking it in your hands, but provide the information that is there to the respective authorities, and trust in them to really do it, because you don't know the repercussions of it. Like where whatever you do, you might be saying that like it is not just about the destiny, it's also about the journey as well. So how you got there is also very important. So that's why I personally prefer like to trust in the agencies that we have, the trust in the different levels of governments and the type of governments that we have, and provide them the information rather than you as a civilian taking it into your hand. But once again, it's a completely personal opinion of mine.
Absolutely. And this is something I'm glad these questions have come up. And I see there are two more questions that have also come up from a business perspective, and I will get to those. But to our audience, yes, Canadian women in cybersecurity will be a great area in which you can actually, we're going to be talking a lot about, for example, trafficking and tracking some of these things, and not just in the apparent internet, but also in the dark web. But it's also a conversation to have when we take the law into our own hands in the digital space. It can seem almost like a lawless space, but there are certain things you need to do to mitigate risk, and engaging with law enforcement is one way to sort of mitigate against some of the risky paths you may be going down. So I really do appreciate, Casey, that you've shared your personal perspective. I'll also add one more point to this is that we understand fully well that the data is out there that there are threat actors that will use the internet to move people around. But the important thing is that if you're seeing something, it is to report it. It is to let somebody know. And a question, Casey, and why we won't delve into it. Okay, a question has come in also about we have evidences online of people being victimized in one way or the other. Do we take it into our own hands? Probably the best thing to do is to follow the path that Casey had outlined. So thank you all for bringing those questions, and definitely food for thought for the upcoming Women in Cyber conference. We have another 10 minutes to go. And in Casey, taking a back step again to the business discussions that we had, a question's come in, which in this case, I'm going to read verbatim. And that is from someone that you may remember from our class, Anish, where he says, even after knowing the importance of security, we see emerging innovations neglecting it from the fundamental level and later adding it as a separate module. What do you think is holding up the industry to make security as a core part of the software development lifecycle? Interesting.
Okay, so this is where like we need to understand, right? Like the landscape of it, like when you start with it, like there is a lot of legacy that everybody inherits. There is the systems that are there, the amount of new systems that you are deploying in any organization, even in an organization that is considered as cutthroat, like or like on the emerging one, is only 20 to 30%. And you always have this legacy technology. And that really makes you stop, like to say, you need to add security on it. Because where we are here right now, like we can talk about, like, let's take this as a time frame to say now we know security as X. But like 5 years later, the security will be X plus Y. And then like if you ask, you'll be asking the same question, why did you think about Y when you were in 2020? Because we didn't have the knowledge of it. The industry itself, like not just because of the particular organization, but like industry as a whole did not have it because these are evolving. So that is where it always will be an add-on kind of a thing, not that like it will be embedded into it. But there is some people like where I agree with Anish's question. There are some areas where we should be looking at, like when you are looking at, like, for example, most of the services, new thing, are a software as a service. Like these are the SaaS solutions that most of the people are going with. So is security a part of it? Absolutely. That should be part of your procurement process and evaluation process to say, how are you dealing with it? Are you ensuring these basic principles? And what is the minimal things that you want to really get it before even you buy that product should be a part of your evaluation or procurement procedure. But you always need to think about that there is an 80% legacy that is sitting in every CIO's closet, and you can't change it. And it's very difficult. Some are from 1940s as well, 1940s, 1950s, and you can laugh about it, but that is the way that is there. That is the reality of life.
Yeah. And I would agree with you. And Anish, to your question, I always ask this is that while we put a lot of onus of responsibility on the producers of technology services, also as consumers, how critical have we been? How much have we questioned in the right spirit? I believe, and this is again a subjective perspective, not something reflective of Durham College, but I do believe that you would see more and more products coming in that are more, just like we've had a movement around eco-friendly products, you'd have products that are more privacy friendly, socially security friendly, if we started to ask the right questions of these products, if we started to look at the results as consumers of some of the practices that we engage in. That's why on February 23rd to 26th, I forget my dates, quite a lot going on, but at DC, we're hosting a session which is called What is Up with WhatsApp? And it's not meant to be a dig at WhatsApp alone. It's really going to be an expose into how we have dived deep into using instant messaging tools. And as an afterthought now, we're beginning to think, well, what did I just sign up for? That also plays into the development of the psyche that we see in the societies that we live in. We have another 7 more minutes, and I do want to run through 2 other sets of sort of categories of discussions with Casey, because I think these are both relevant and important to the community. And this has to do with cybersecurity in general, training, and basically developing talent in cybersecurity. Now, Casey, you've just like myself, you've always believed that to teach is to learn, and you've been teaching and learning about different grades of users. You've been teaching graduate students, undergrad students. You've also been teaching people who are professionals themselves. And we always talk about this skills gap in cybersecurity in Canada. It's a buzzword, but it does hold some relevance. In your opinion, what is that one skill that is defining the gap that we're seeing in cybersecurity talent within Canada?
I think one skill is finding the balance. I think I have students like where people talk about it. It is about when you talk about privacy, you have to talk about personalization,
Yeah.
because it is these are two parts of the spectrum. To say like when you go into any Amazon or any other, not to pick Amazon, but like just taking it as an example, where when you log into it, like it's so personalized. But what is the cost that you're paying is the privacy that you put in.
Yeah.
So what does that privacy, that definition of privacy, that definition of personalization, and
Absolutely.
how you can see that balance, and you are impartial while implementing the solutions, is where the skill set is going. That is where they lack in, because everybody is learning a particular technology. They are great at that technology. That's good. But like the only way you're going to roll out the technology is not by scaring, but like it is about giving that option to the user. It is educating those people and like bringing in that balanced opinion to say, this is what you get and where do you want the meter to set in. I think that is what I see, that is in there is a middle level gap where there are a lot of technical people, there are a lot of great salespeople. In between, there is that gap to really giving that thought leadership to say, what do we need to do? And even in leaders, like when I go into CIO forums, a lot of the things I see, either people are completely against it or people are in the freedom. But like I think we need to have much more on a balanced approach.
Absolutely. And striking the balance, right? This has always been something that we talk about, that we advocate about, but as true to Casey's form is that he's defined striking a balance through a metric. What defines that you have struck a balance? And I think this is one of those things where whatever concept it is that you're trying to deploy, how do you define it? And then what are some of the metrics around that? If we say we want to adhere to an economy where we're respecting everybody's privacy rights and instant messaging, well, what do we mean by privacy rights? And if that is the case, then what are some quantifiable goals we can have around that? For example, are these products we're allowing into place, do they have this type of mention in their terms? Do they have these kind of policies? Have they communicated in so and so way? There are certain playbooks that are evolving, and I don't call them checklists, but I do call them playbooks because they're evolving, that we need to develop and we need to subscribe to. For me, I think if I had to provide my 2 rupees of thought, besides the soft skills that define the talent gap that we have, one of the problems that we have, where there's a solution for it, but one of the problems that we do have is in our inability to define what we are talking about, even when we say some buzzwords like digital transformation. Well, what does it even mean? Well, aren't we all already in a digital space? Knowing how to quantify these, knowing how to explain this in a way where somebody who knows nothing about whether you're on Windows or Linux can understand it. That's the key over here. And I always say this to my students, that if you can get a baker to understand how you've deployed something on a server, you've done a good job, because this is somebody who has nothing to do with that sector, but suddenly can relate to it in a certain way. Making cybersecurity more relatable, I feel, is one of those things. Casey, we're coming close to the end of our time together, but we have another 2 minutes, and I want to peek and go back to where we started from, into the person behind. We looked at process, we looked at technology. I want to go into the person that is behind Casey. And I've always said this, that there's no invitation to bring ideas to the table. You can always bring your ideas. You've always been an ideas person, and you've always been somebody who's executed on those ideas. Was there a book or an experience in your life that shaped the person that you've become?
That's it.
It can be a
I'll
Bollywood movie too. That's fine.
I wish it was like I can say all the Bollywood movies that I watched, like I think it combined into one thing. But I sincerely believe that there is one thing, that book that always stuck with me. That is the first English book that I have ever read, and it was the shortest book. And I picked that because somebody told me to learn it. You have to read a book, and I picked the one from its size, and that's Who Moved My Cheese. I still remember that
Yes.
book.
Yep. I
I
read
still
the
remember the book. It is, I think it sincerely put me into thinking, because it is a very short and sweet book, but like pushes you into thinking the things.
Absolutely. And you know what? I've said this all the time, right? It's having plans is one thing, but it's all about planning. And you need to be active in that process. And not only is that book very important, but I think there's another piece, Casey, which I do want to get your perspective on, is that you've really, really valued the relations that you've had with people. And often this happens that when you get to that C-suite level, you often tend to have closed doors. You don't communicate with everyone. You maintain a little bit of your privacy because you do need that level of control. And sometimes it can bleed into rules around conflict of interest, so on and so forth. But one thing about you is that almost you're always reachable. Is that something that serves you well, or is just something that you just can't break off? Because it's very easy to get a hold of you within an hour, even if you're on a vacation or whatever have you. Is that something that's helping you, or is just something you just can't shed off you anymore?
I think it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah,
I try to do it, but I can't. I think I'm addicted to it, and as well as like it helps me because that is what got me here. Like if that is the secret of my success, and like if I'm just waving away from it, then like maybe I won't be succeeding in future. But it definitely is a double-edged sword. What that also means from I hear a lot of people saying that like you are attached to your phone, you are attached to this, you are doing multitasking. So like it's difficult. There is no right way or wrong way doing it, but it served me well, and it has its own problems as well.
absolutely. And there's a comment there by another one of our guests saying, listen, it's all about design. There's no good design or bad design. It's design at the end of the day. Rather, I'd reword that a little bit. There is only good or bad design. Everything happens by the way we think through it. And I think security by design, privacy by design, all of these features all play into the kind of products we develop, but also the kind of demeanor we maintain in the security space and with our peers and partners, so on and so forth. There were a few more questions, but we have come to the end of our hour with Kalyan, and I know he has other places to be. So, Kalyan, before I bid you adieu, I do want to thank our audience for joining in today. Kalyan, I do request you to stay on so that we can just have a brief 30-second debrief in the green room. But to our audience, for me, I've done many sessions with Casey, and I don't need to prepare much simply because the knowledge that he shares comes from experience, and these are the kind of experiences that the Power Hour is built on, sharing these experiences with you in a relatable, accessible format. So, for those of you who watched the live session, thank you very much. If you know someone who would benefit from this session in the next 48 hours, it will be posted on the on demand. I do encourage you to join the Cyber Exchange community where you can get other sessions as well. And I'll leave you with my typical way of closing these very important sessions, which is with my takeaways. Remember this and put this on a shirt. Another quote that I'm asking you to put on a shirt, and that is the best time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining. When Casey said something to the effect of, you prepare for the worst and hope for the best, it really is about being proactive. So when the sun is shining, make sure that you're doing the checks. When nobody's looking, when everything looks calm, make sure that you're doing the checks because that 1 second of disarray can cause or put you back 3 years, if not more. I do encourage you to think very carefully about your strategies towards security, but more importantly, about your own journey in the path of security. There is no one size fits all solution. Speaking of no one size fits all solution, I cannot wait to host all of you for the next Power Hours. We've got a couple of more lined up for February, some sessions with IBM, Kaspersky, and a very special one with VMware Carbon Black featuring Eric O'Neill and his journey as America's first cyber spy. Thank you all very much for joining me today. I'll see you at the next Power Hour, which will all be announced on cyberexchange.ca. And Casey, once again, thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you in the green room. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.